Wouldn't you like to exchange a little Tebowing or some Linfinity for seeing God face to face, or having such a glow or an aura that you have seemed to have transformed physically? Maybe that would leave you like those 3 disciples, terrified. Now, preaching professor Dr. Mike Graves says in Mark's gospel, anytime the disciples are afraid or terrified, you could just as easily translate it as confused. The Greek word for terrified is duh. Peter didn't know what to say, writes Mark, for they were terrified. Same thing as duh in this case. If these layers aren't enough, then there is up on the mountain and down in the valley model of this passage. Isn't the mountaintop supposed to be a symbol of glory and greatness and spiritual renewal, an enhancing experience? And according to my good friend and biblical interpreter, the Reverend Kate Huey, Peter and others have high expectations of the Messiah, and suffering and death are not even on that list. Mountaintop experiences are definitely on their list, but not the kind of a cross on a hill. They want to see booths raised, not a cross. They can't get their minds around it. Duh. They do not know what to say. They long for glory. They think it's within their grasp. And yet Jesus tells them to be quiet. Everyone knows glory is only glory if other people know about it. And Kate continues, the word glory is often used in sports and military settings. The movie Glory Road reminds us that the glory of championships lies at the end of a long, hard climb. In the case of Texas Western and the basketball team in the film, the glory they experience momentarily lives on in their memories because people recognize its groundbreaking significance as a team of African American young men upset the favored team from the University of Kentucky. And how could anyone watch that game on film and not feel a glorious joy? And then there is this beautiful movie, one of my very favorites, Glory, which told the story of African American soldiers during the Civil War. In both sports and war, glory is hard won. After suffering, self-sacrifice, extraordinary effort, it is earned, and it is elusive. You know, no guts, no glory. Now let's make some sense out of this story. Look at the dramatic movement of this story. Jesus takes his disciples with him up the mountain. And after the period of spiritual deepening and thrill, they come back down again. Preaching professor David Loesch says this. Think of it. Jesus could have stayed there. He could have stayed on that mountaintop. And perhaps he should have stayed there. After all, this transfigured state, attended by Moses and Elijah and his 3 disciples, was much closer to the state of glory that Jesus deserved than what is coming. Yet he comes back down into the mundane nature of every life, down into the nitty-gritty details of misunderstanding and squabbling and disbelieving disciples, down into the religious and political quarrels of his day, down into the jealousies and the rivals, both petty and gigantic, that color our relationships, down into the poverty and pain that are part and parcel of life in this world. This story of the Transfiguration is not a story of going up, of our going up. It is a story about Jesus coming down, all the way down into our brokenness and our fear and our disappointment and our loss. You know, no guts, no glory. Now, David Lose, who is a seminary professor of preaching, far be it from me to question him, but I think he makes sense. David Lose says this process is important for 2 reasons. Jesus' downward movement from his rightful place in glory to embrace our lot in life out of love is in a very real sense the essence of the gospel. And 2, most of us think deep down, be honest with yourself, Jesus is just a little bit too good for us. I used to have a friend in elementary school, and she always looked perfect. I mean, I don't know how the child could stay so clean and so fastidious and so neat. At that point, little girls had the long hair, and they would, tube them down. So you'd have these long curls coming down. Every one of those curls was perfect. And man, was I impressed. I was not only impressed, I was infatuated. If anybody had glory, it was that little girl. But you know what we called her behind her back? Little Miss Goody Two Shoes. Most of us think deep down inside that Jesus is a little Miss Goody Two Shoes. A little bit too good for us. And whenever we try to be more like Jesus, that is perfect, we know that we fall dreadfully short. As a consequence, we may feel that the most broken parts of our lives are the ones that keep us from being like Jesus, and therefore are the farthest things from him. but my friends. And I am pleased to call you my friends. The cycle is not no glory, no guts. The cycle is, say it with me, no guts, no glory. So I invite you to take just a few quiet moments of candid thought. Steve, take a few quiet moments of candid thought about what is dark and fearful in our lives. Are you there yet? Think of all those pinching places. Think of how lonely and alone you can feel. Think about the worst thing you've ever done in your life that you still haven't let yourself live down. Think about how hard you try to be good and you continually find yourself falling down according to your high standards. Think about all those little human things in your life that make you human and humane, but you don't like to talk about it. Think about how easily your feelings get hurt. And for some of you, think about how easily you hurt other people's feelings. Think about all those times you were called upon by your conscience to stand up and speak for the underdog, or speak the truth about a moral value from a religious conscience, and you didn't. Think about how you saw somebody hurting and you drove right on by. I think many of you are there right now. We do not do this, my friends, to dwell in the dark places of our lives, but rather to remind us that Jesus is right there. Jesus is already there. This Jesus is not afraid of what is most difficult in our lives.